few times. He's the CEO of a Brisbane-based home renovator, the QHI Group, and he joins us now. Scott, you haven't got happy news, have you?
No, I haven't got happy news, Gary, not at all.
What's happening to the price of construction next year?
We are absolutely blowing out. Forecasting at the moment a 10 to 20% rise in construction costs between now and June in 25.
And why is that? What's driving that?
Well, it's a combination of things, Gary. We like I said before on previous shows with you, we've spoken about the perfect storm, and that's where we are now in construction. The cost of materials still hasn't come back down, the cost of labour, the availability of labour. And then you've got the inputs that are driven by government, your cost of building approvals, your fees and charges, your ability to run a business in this economy at the moment. All of those things are all pushing upwards as far as prices go.
So the best time to do it is now, is what you're saying.
Well, there's never been a better time. The best time was in 2019, I would imagine.
Well, thanks very much. So 5 years ago.
And what brought this to my attention more recently again was pricing a project from 2020 where I had a customer come back around and ask me to review it, and we were 65% higher than we were in 2020.
Nice stars.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you actually budget for that? You as a company and somebody as a client.
Well, this is why 3,000 builders have gone broke in Australia in the last 12 months. I know there's some pretty unscrupulous operators in there, but it's definitely been challenging.
Well, I never understood how we can have people going bust in the middle of a housing crisis, but you're right, there's all these additional add-on hidden costs and I guess getting it all working, because I've spoken to some other people in the broad sector and they've said it's the cash flow side of it, that if you've got to borrow money or have cash flow to keep the construction going, that all adds on to the cost of it. There's just so many different elements.
Yeah, and building is a roller coaster, and as an industry, we know that it's always ups and downs. And as far as revenue goes, it peaks and it has troughs. So what we have to do is try and manage that the best that we can. Diversification in your company, trying to balance out the contracts. But when we see upwards pressure continually on pricing, and then add in the fact that you're waiting so long for a building approval now, longer than you've ever waited, paying more for it, and those costs continue to climb. Every day that project takes longer, it's costing you money.
So what are the top three things that are driving up the cost of construction? Can you nail it down to 3 or 4 or 5 things? Because it's always good to try and get a handful of problems, rather than millions of them.
Well, we've got the introduction of the NCC, the National Construction Code, and what that's done is it's increased the type of materials or the cost of those projects, because we've now got to comply with these 7-star energy ratings. We've got the disability access stuff. This is stuff that we've spoken about before, and I know you've touched on many times. But those things are all pushing into these projects now. They've been implemented in full. What we need to do is see a retraction of the building codes back to a reasonable level to try and offset some of these things, like you mentioned before, about being able to build in flood zones. If we've got to build that house off the ground, why don't we offset some of the cost by reducing some of the inputs into that home?
Yeah, because the story we're hearing today is that the houses are built too low to the ground. So, all right, we'll lift everything up 4 or 5 feet. That's not a solution if you're 4 or 5 feet lower at the house next door. I mean, it's not going to work, is it?
It's one of those things now where we're going to trade off energy efficiency and saving the planet for homelessness. We've got a record number of homeless people in the country. We've got a housing crisis. We can't build anything affordably and quickly anymore. And I made this point recently, when I'm reviewing older projects, is you can't build the house your grandparents built in the 1980s. That low-set brick and tile home, 3 and 2 maybe, you can't build that anymore. That home is not able to be built under the current construction codes. Now, back then, you could build that home for about $600 a square metre. Under the current standards, that's $3,000 plus.
So, okay, I've just interpreted that as we're saving the planet by keeping people homeless. That's kind of where we're at.
You're not going to have both, mate. You can't save the planet and solve the homeless problem. It's not going to happen.
It's just dreadful.
Well, it's a perfect storm. It's a pickle that needs to be... We need to have a rational conversation about this, and we need to remove the ideology around the greenwashing of everything and go, what can we do to build homes affordably and safely for people? There is a price on safety. It's $3,000 a square metre plus, mate. That's what it is.
So if you're going to do some renovations in 2025, I mean, how do you actually preserve your situation? How do you actually future-proof the project?
By getting smaller. It's really hard to run this type of business at scale now. You've got to be really careful about the clients that you take on and the projects that you bring in. You could sign a contract for a project that might take 6 months for a building approval, 8 months for a building approval, a year for a building approval.
So automatically the home takes 2 years to build at that point.
Yeah, 100%. And so, if you're waiting a year for a building approval and you've already seen a 30% upwards increase on prices, what's going to happen? You are going to wear the cost, because as a company, I'm going to make sure that my contract allows me to the flexibility to be able to negotiate that price down the track.
Because if you set a price today and you know that it's going to take 6 months to approve or 8 months to approve, and then it's going to take, and if the materials are available, the people are available, the costs and everything are going to go up.
That's right.
Automatically you've got a cash flow problem, or your client's got a problem. The contracts are going to have to be able to reflect that, I guess.
And that's why in the last couple of years, so many builders in this profitless boom, you mentioned that before, the boom that we've gone through, it's been absolutely profitless for so many companies because those margins have been absolutely destroyed.
So how does a company like yours, others, builders, renovating companies like QHI Group, manage the challenge? You say going small, is that the only way? As in, you've got to be very, very careful. You almost got to interview your clients before you take the job on.
Absolutely. Pick your projects very carefully. And I know many companies out there that are doing it that way. They've actually bunkered down. We're preparing for bad. And, if we have another wet summer like we did last summer, and just on that wet summer, the Bureau of Meteorology forecast a dry summer. We didn't get a dry summer. We got a very wet summer last year. Looks like we're going to get the same thing this year. What happens if we lose 50 days of building time? What happens?
Well, it's happening all over the place.
That's right.
And 50 days is pretty, modest compared to some of the 150-day delays on some big projects we've heard. And
well, it's that every day it takes, it costs you money. Every day longer it takes, it costs you money. It eats those margins.
So, mate, on a somewhat different agenda, it's 20 years ago since the Boxing Day tsunami. Where were you?
Funny story. I was actually in Patong in Thailand when the tsunami rolled through, so I was pretty close to the action.
Yeah.
I was in the hotel when the earthquake hit around about 10 a.m. Felt the building shaking pretty badly and thought, look, I need to get out of here because this doesn't feel good. And I had one of the ladies in the hallway who was a cleaner. She was yelling at me, "It's okay, the Japanese built this one. It's not going to fall down." I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm still going to get outside in the street anyway. It was a beautiful blue sky day, fantastic, and was walking towards the water because I was just going to spend the day lying on the beach. And I saw a sign on the back of a taxi that said Phuket shooting range. So I headed up to the shooting range to shoot some guns instead. And that was the only reason I wasn't laying on the beach when that wave came through.
So what did the taxi driver say to you on the way back to the hotel?
He kicked us out of the cab, and because I was there with a mate, and kicked us out and said, Patong gone, Patong gone. He wouldn't tell us what was going on. We'd seen him on his phone, but we got out, we're about 4 or 5 k's from Patong Beach, and we just legged it. I just ran down there to see what was going on, and we saw a whole bunch of people coming up the road trying to get away from Patong, and saw this white lady and asked what happened, and she said, "There's been a tsunami and everyone down there's dead." So that was that.
But you've gone up to the shooting range. You've got the high ground. You're here to tell the story. You had people in you back there. What did you do?
We spent the next 24 hours. We were there for about another day and a half, just helping people. Just trying to bandage people, get people to the hospital, just trying to help people find their stuff. It was pretty messy, and look, it was pretty emotional at the time as well. But I was much younger. I just got out of the military, so I get a bit harder than I probably am now, a bit softer as you get older. But it wasn't something that I would have seen or expected before. I'd never seen anything like that.
I don't know whether you could ever get it out of your head. You cope with it?
Very much so. I'm actually going back there this Christmas for the 20th anniversary of it. I don't know whether much is happening in Patong, but I'm really looking forward to it. I've made my peace with it, and I don't really lose any sleep over it. I feel pretty good. I consider myself lucky, but when I got back, my first daughter was conceived, so I think I've had a pretty blessed life since then. So.
Yes, okay. You've found a way of recovering is what you're telling me.
So look, the building industry can throw me curveballs, but I don't think it's going to be anything compared to risking your life.
No, either way, mate, we appreciate your insights in this. So the warning's out there now. It's going to be a tougher 6 months ahead in a lot of ways.
Every builder I know is bunkering down, ready for the storm that's coming, mate. Not just the weather. We know that this is going to be a really tough next 12 months, and I think the companies that have got through this last year are in a good position to be able to deal with it now.
All right, good to see you. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Great talking.
Scott.